Insights into the 2013 national budget continues in this edition of Business PNG, featuring recent research analysis presented by the government's think tank, National Research Institute, in collaboration with the Australian National University. We'll have that analysis later, but first, the government's position. We left off last year in an attempt to draw light on what's described as the government's bold and most innovative budget ever endorsed, one with a deficit of 2.5 billion kina. The 2013 budget is Papua New Guinea's first to have reached a substantial 13 billion kina, and according to the national government, the deficit is intended to increase expenditure on the medium-term development key enablers. Despite all the pessimism surrounding the budget deficit of 2.5 billion kina in 2013, the national government says it has its reasons for the deficit. A long-term plan that should see the budget return to surplus by 2017. Indirectly, all eyes are set on the proceeds of the multi-billion kina gas project. But is running the country into the red of over $1 billion the right thing to do? That's the question being asked today. Treasurer Don Pollier says the budget is designed to be in deficit in order to greatly increase expenditure on the medium-term development enablers, of which are infrastructure, education, health, law and order, and land, with much emphasis given to the sub-national level. The deficit this year amounts to around 7.2% of PNG's gross domestic product. A decline to 5.9% is anticipated next year from another deficit of 2.3 billion kina. However, the next sharp fall anticipated in 2017 should bring the deficit to a moderate 1.6%. The Treasurer and his counterpart, Finance Minister James Marape, attended the National Research Institute and Australian National University's 2013 Budget Forum in Port Moresby early this year to present the government's position.
With the high level of liquidity we have in our system, we are able to raise 2.6 billion kina confidently. Of that, 1.6 will be raised internally through Treasury bill and inscribed stocks, and the Treasurer and his team will be on the road, and we are confident in raising 1 billion kina to meet the total deficit we have planned for this year. So what the government has done is we've said, look, we must grow the economy by the next 5 years to a 58 billion kina, but within a very responsible fiscal framework. In PNG, when we say responsible fiscal framework, people don't believe us because they're saying, oh, this political presence come on, and we go haywire. But let me assure you, this time will not be the same. I will be very, very strict on the release of warrants.
The forum attracted more than 120 participants from international donor partners to the public and private sectors, NGO representatives and academics of leading institutions.
The project basically started, we started discussions about a year or two ago when the government, PNG, has had an economic boom over the last 10 years. We've seen huge amounts of money being available for government to spend, and we've seen billions of kina being spent, but our service delivery at the other end, the services were worsening or deteriorating. And so what we wanted to do was to have a forum and a study, a research project that will analyze the budgets and how budgets are being implemented to find out what were the implementation issues and why we were not achieving the outcomes that we wanted.
The theme had it all emphasized: the focus and implementation of the 2013 national budget. And the two senior ministers discussed the significant increase in decentralized funding to the provincial, district and local level governments that's gone up 15% compared to last year's 5%. Minister Pollier says Papua New Guinea's economic outlook is promising despite the projected 4% growth rate compared to last year's 9.2%.
I think Papua New Guinea, we look at ourselves in this region, we have projected a growth of 4% this year. In normal terms, we're looking at 8% growth. Next year, we believe we'll grow at 7% or 6-7%, normally at 11% growth. As you come to year 2015, we're projecting that the PNG economy will grow at a nominal 29% or 26%, in real terms 20%, and that probably will be because of the influx of revenue from the sale of the first export of LNG project. And then, of course, comes down to a moderate growth for the next to last year. So that's probably the outlook of the PNG economy.
Now, national budgets and economic conditions. These two go side by side as economic conditions influence the implementation of national budgets world over. Thus, it is best we took a glimpse of the global economic outlook and how this has an influence to the implementation of the PNG National Budget 2013. According to the January World Economic Outlook, International Monetary Fund projected a modest rise in global economic growth for the year, but also warning that problems in the Eurozone and United States could derail momentum. IMF reported that the world economy grew by an estimate 3.2% last year. However, there remain significant challenges ahead. The Eurozone debt crisis remains impulsive, with IMF predicting a slight economic contraction this year. Despite positive steps to tackle the debt crisis in some Eurozone countries, continued uncertainty about a resolution to the crisis is weighing down growth prospects, posing a large downside to the global outlook. The latest update is more optimistic about the US economy, forecasted to grow by 2% this year, but prospects could change depending on imminent tax and spending decisions. But what does this mean for the PNG economy? Well, the economy here has seen an upward turn since 2005. The largest economic growth rate of 11.1% recorded in 2011. 2012 saw a slight drop to 9.2%. Much of the strong growth had been derived from the construction phase of the liquefied natural gas project.
With the LNG project, the activities are subsiding. We like to cushion that. We like to see employment maintained, or at least the shock that comes about to employment and economic growth is not as that impacting because of a sudden decline in activities at the LNG project. So the government must increase expenditure, and that is a thing that you've seen America doing that. Australians have done it. Europe has done it. Of course, in Europe, some arguing that there should be austerity. But others saying, let's give more money to stimulate the economic growth. PNC, in a moderate way, we have said, look, let's spend 2.6 billion kina beyond our revenue, but we can finance that and to stimulate that economic growth and cushion some of those pressures that come onto the economy because of the decline in the LNG project. So there you are. We have that. Don't be worried about the new innovative strategy that PNG is taking. We've never done it before. We're doing it now. But we're confident. We're very careful.
And though the 2013 projection is positive, growth is lower compared to the past 6 years, driven by the winding down of the PNG gas project's construction phase. The Treasurer, however, says updates from the LNG project indicate that construction works will continue this year. As a result, the Treasury Department is in the process of reviewing its economic outlook, which should see a slight increase from the projected 4% growth rate. The result will be published mid this year. There are 3 key expenditure areas in the PNG budget. A story outlining this when we come back. The national government is confident it will deliver on its budget through a practical and responsible structure already in place. But concerns have surfaced surrounding the consequences of the 44% increase in the development budget and the implications that come with the massive allocation of funding towards decentralized projects for the provincial, district and local level governments. According to the national government, the 2013 budget strategy is to deliver on its Allotawa Code priorities within the context of a practical and responsible fiscal framework that supports current economic growth, promotes macroeconomic stability, and addresses the country's development needs by increasing development funding within a multi-year framework.
This is the first ever budget that development funds are now going straight to the local level government to support various local level government based development programs at their level, like the elementary schools, like the community health posts and the community law and order programs. For the first time we've done that. Why are we doing this? The O'Neill Dion government believe, and I also believe with all heart in my heart, that there must be cohesion with the people on the ground, the mess of the population, with the government's activity and the development agenda. And in order to have that cohesion, you have to make sure that people participate in nation building. The government can't do it alone. We cannot babysit them all the time. We cannot say you cannot do it because you have got this problem like governance issues and all that. Of course, we know those challenges are there. We can fix them. Problems are created by humans, and humans can fix those problems, unless those that are created by the nature. And with confidence in our people, we have got a three-tier government system, and therefore we've got to recognize them by putting the money to those areas, and the money must be spent. We don't believe that government can do it alone without the people at the LG and at the provincial level and the district level. So that's why we've increased the funding there.
Treasurer Don Poulier says there are three key expenditure areas: the 87% increase in funding for subnational levels of government through a 1.4 billion kina program budgeted annually, sustained planning, design and implementation for key national infrastructure investments such as the complete funding for the Highlands Highway with 12.1 billion kina committed over the next 5 years, and the support towards key development enablers of infrastructure, education, health and law and order that's seen a massive increase of 50% from around 5 billion kina last year to 7.5 billion kina this year.
We will make sure that we achieve objective within the framework. So I'd like to give the assurance that we will do our best, and we'd like to do quite differently. You can trust us because we have done certain things differently now. You saw one-year budgeting. We have made it 5 years. You saw us not doing deficits. And some of you guys are scared. Why are you guys scared? It's like managing your own finances. Of course, if you want to grow and do something, you do want to borrow money from the bank, don't you? But within your means. The bank gives you an assessment and says, well, of course, you bought the background to pay. Of course, we give you the loan. Now, PNG, we're not a country that is in the past age. We are growing. We see the contemporary economic environment that is supposed to be before us. And we are saying, look, we've got this capability. Now, we'd like to see the economy grow and sustain.
However, with the high government spending and increase in commodity prices this year, inflation is anticipated to pick up to 8%. The government has indicated it is mindful of the increased inflationary pressure, making sure its fiscal and monetary policies are well managed to minimize and ensure stability is maintained against inflation. But that's not the concern here. Academics and analysts are afraid that much priority given to the development budget may have an adverse impact on the recurrent budget for existing infrastructure. This year's development budget alone has been given a hefty 44% of the total budget. This is due to the 1.492 billion kina being allocated directly for provincial, district and local level governments. Professor Stephen Hose, director of the Australian National University's Development Policy Centre, says expenditure has outstripped revenue, giving rise to fiscal risks. And though there's been an increase in frontline service delivery this year, Professor Hose argues that they appear to be temporary and the underfunding is likely to worsen in the future. One obvious indicator is the number of teachers per student.
I think the government could take an example from the road sector and really work out, how many new teachers do we need? Right? There are a lot more students now because of the free education and the growing population. There are more teachers budgeted for this year, but after this year, no new teachers have been budgeted for at all, and likewise for health workers and for police. I think the government needs to come up with a plan.
Stay tuned for the budget analysis presented by the National Research Institute and the Australian National University's Policy Development Centre. If you've just joined us, we're featuring Papua New Guinea's 2013 budget and the implications that come with the budget deficit and the increase in devolved or decentralized project funding. Findings from the National Research Institute and the Policy Development Centre of the Australian National University indicate that frontline service delivery is being squeezed. Despite the reasonable growth in expenditure to benefit key sectors, this may not be consistent, and underfunding for key priority areas could worsen in the future. The issue presented before the government by its think tank National Research Institute and the Australian National University's Development Policy Centre is, while there have been welcome increases in priority sectors, there's also signs of frontline service delivery being squeezed, consistent with a massive increase in decentralized project funding. In this instance, it's taken up 1.492 billion kina of the total budget. ANU's Development Policy Centre Director, Professor Stephen Ho, says this is likely to worsen in the future if the projected slow revenue growth eventuates.
There's been such a big increase in the development budget that it's not a problem for this year, because this year overall there's a large increase in the budget. But after this year, because of the deficit and because of slow revenue growth, we're not going to see much growth in total expenditure. And so that core funding for frontline service delivery is at risk of being squeezed.
According to the analysis by NRI and ANU, there are several reasons for the squeeze on frontline service delivery funding, the slowdown in the overall expenditure growth rate being on the top of this list. Another reason here is that the development budget continues to expand at the expense of the recurrent budget, which funds frontline service delivery projects. Looking back through the years, the last 10 years saw the share of the total budget taken up by the development budget rise from 30% to 40%. This upward trend is projected to continue, reaching almost 50% by 2017. And this, by international standards, is very high. In a constrained fiscal environment, the implication is that recurrent funding for existing infrastructure will fall.
I'm not saying the government can't manage a deficit. I'm sure they can manage a deficit. But as the government's own budget shows, because of the deficit this year, you're not going to see the sort of rapid growth in expenditure that's in this budget. Right? This budget has more than a 20% increase in expenditure, so it's a very large increase, and we've seen some of those in the past, but the government's not anticipating that in the future. It's going to have much slower expenditure growth so that revenue can catch up, because the government is committed to closing that deficit over the next few years.
Looking at the 2013 budget, the biggest change here is in devolved or decentralized funding to provinces, districts and local level governments that's seen a massive 15% increase. While devolution is welcoming, the increase in funding has been given to the development budget and so will result in more projects rather than recurrent funding for service delivery.
What we do worry about is that development budget is usually about increased allocations to things like building new classrooms, building new roads, and doing new things. Whereas the recurrent budget is about maintaining the existing things.
The budget analysis also looked into the Sovereign Wealth Fund, of which findings indicate that the design of the fund will direct the PNG LNG project into development rather than recurrent funding. Initial evidence from a survey by NRI and ANU is consistent with the squeeze of funding from frontline services. A survey called PNG Promoting Effective Public Expenditure, or the PEPE project. Many examples point to the District Service Improvement Program, or DSIP projects. While this particular project is meant to improve infrastructure at the district level, buildings for many schools and health centers stand incomplete, or even if completed, they cannot be used due to staffing constraints.
The government needs to come up with a plan for how it wants to grow and fill the gaps in these core service delivery areas and make that the top priority for its budget in the coming years.
Professor Ho says it is an important time as the 2013 budget will see many new reform initiatives, and so monitoring of implementation will be the key. The PEPE project, funded by AUSAID through the Economic and Public Sector Program, emphasizes on data collection, and so should be vital for government and civil society. The end of the expenditure boom and what that would mean for service delivery, that's next. Could this be the last days of Papua New Guinea's economic boom? Well, strong and broad economic growth continued last year, but then again, projections has it that drivers of this strength have started to recede. The World Bank says last year may have been the last year of strong growth. And while the budget may be affordable in the short term, an extended series of deficits planned out by the government gives rise to bringing PNG into macroeconomic instability. Is this the end of the expenditure boom? This question was the main focus by presenters at the NRI and ANU 2013 Budget Forum. According to the World Bank Group in Papua New Guinea, the economic growth experienced in 2012 may have been the last year for the strong growth for most sectors in this economic cycle. And the challenge of turning the last days of the boom into lasting improvements in living standards may have its consequences. The driving forces for growth are approaching exhaustion, and with the government's approach to broaden the cycle as indicated in the 2013 budget, will have risks involved.
But there are risks with this approach, and the nature of PNG's development brings inherent risks. The resource-intensive nature of this development makes these ambitions of the government a little bit more challenging to achieve.
World Bank says the national budget represents a clear change from recent years, with the largest deficit of 2.5 billion kina on record apart from the 2009 global economic crisis. Substantially more funds allocated to lower-level administrations and the anticipated slowdown in revenue growth. But while this budget may be affordable in the short term, an extended series of deficit poses risks for the nation returning to macroeconomic instability. The government is optimistic it will bring the budget back to balance come 2017 elections through strong revenue growth and plans to slow down spending.
The debt is very, very important. With at the moment a 8 billion kina debt, and we see in the next medium term our debt will rise to it may come to 15-16 billion within the frame of the budget in the next 5 years at a targeted GDP growth that we like to see up to 58 billion, and we like to stay within our debt management strategy as per the fiscal responsibility act, and we would like to keep it below 35% of the GDP of PNG. So these are the policies that we have laid out for the next 5 years, and we're working within that parameter.
However, critics and development partners say many of these plans appear ambitious and may create tensions with the government's development goals. By capping the government's debt ratios, the new medium-term debt strategy anchors these fiscal targets. But there are significant risks surrounding these projections and around the effectiveness of spending as far more funds are allocated to less developed areas of PNG's public financial management systems. The World Bank says focus in PNG generally has been on the quality of spending. But the 2013 budget starts to reverse improvements in public finances, and the government's goal of having a balanced budget by 2017 calls for unwinding new spending in real per capita terms, which may be difficult, causing the country prone to macroeconomic risks. Meanwhile, the 2013 budget will continue to be on the spotlight for months to come. And that's all we have for this edition. You can access our programs online through the web address now shown on your screen. And for more information about the program or queries and suggestions you'd like to share with us, do send them through to businesspng@mtv.com.pg. Until next Tuesday, I'm Festus Maigana. Bye for now.